Now I'd like to welcome Ryan Brenneman, CTO of MVD.
So even the most compelling content can be derailed if you don't have stable and fast enough internet, Ethernet networking to deliver it. If you've been streaming long enough, we've all had it happen where the internet goes down in the middle of your live stream, or if you're supposed to be streaming from a venue and they either can't provide you the level of connectivity you need, or they want to charge you an arm and a leg for it. So Miri Technologies is a new technology startup focused on enabling faster, more resilient internet from anywhere. The origin of Miri and our first product, the X510 dual-cellular bonding router, came from when I was working in live production. I was live streaming a government official, but at the last minute, they moved the production control room where I was going to be working out of to the interior of the hotel. And this new location had horrible cellular connectivity, which was needed for my bonded encoder. But the venue wanted to charge me thousands of dollars to get a wired Ethernet to that room, and it was more than I was even getting paid for the job. So I heard of Speedify channel bonding app. I decided to give it a try on my streaming computer. So I combined my poor performing cellular data with the venue's public Wi-Fi behind a captive portal. And that's something that I just couldn't use the bonded encoder. It couldn't defeat the captive portal. And by downloading Speedify, it saved me for that project. So I started thinking about what could be achieved if Speedify technology was integrated directly into a hardware network router. And that really is the idea that became the Miri X510. So we launched the X510 at NAB New York last month, although some of you probably have seen previews of it at the Magewell booth at various shows of the last year. We frankly used the device in prototype form to give us better internet at our trade show booths, not only at Magewell, but also at Telecam. And Magewell helped Miri develop the router. We know that Magewell is synonymous with reliability, and that's something that's really important to us as well. So the Miri X510 can combine Wi-Fi, gigabit Ethernet, satellite connections such as Starlink, and mobile data connections to enable faster speeds and robust reliability. Automatic failover ensures seamless connectivity even if one of the internet service provider fails. If this connectivity isn't enough, you can increase bandwidth even more with Speedify's patented pair and share technology, which I'll talk more about in just a bit. I mentioned that the router has integrated Speedify technology, and if you're familiar with network bonding, it involves endpoints like the X510 as well as a server. The X510 requires Speedify subscription for bonding through their servers that are offered globally and worldwide, but we include the first 3 months of their subscription free with the router. So one other thing that I'll mention now, and then you'll see when I show you the router, is that it has slots for 2 optional NPF batteries. These are the same batteries that you'd use on your Sony camera or Magewell Director Mini, and it allows the X510 to be used as a portable router in the field. Unlike dedicated video contribution systems that bond connections, the X510 is not limited to just delivering video and audio and is not tied to any particular codec or streaming protocol. It supports any type of data from financial transactions to live streams in any or current or future formats. And I'll pause here and just say that a lot of our devices want to be connected to the internet in production. Magewell's Pro Converts or Ultra Encode, these things can all be controlled from the cloud from anywhere remotely. And so when your network becomes bonded with better connectivity, you get all the benefits of every single device on your local production network having internet connectivity. You get the benefit of being able to monitor the live stream and the chat, and all of that is going through a more robust connection. So with the robust connections that I kind of highlighted about, it can actually bond up to 7 connections on the physical hardware. That includes integrated 5G and 4G modems, 2 RJ45 gigabit Ethernet ports, Wi-Fi 6 connectivity, and 2 USB ports for optional modems. The SIMs are not included for the 4G and 5G, so you can choose your own carrier. And I actually think that that's a benefit. You can negotiate whatever tier you want for the data, whatever providers you want. And so we give you that flexibility where you're not tied into that. Now, of course, we do recommend getting SIM cards from 2 different carriers. So if one carrier network goes down, you can still use the other one. The ability to bond 4G LTE and 5G helps overcome network congestion in crowded venues. And I'll say that one of the things that we have seen is when the networks become congested, a lot of times that's on the 5G. And so having the 4G modem locked in does give you an advantage for this router. And we're seeing that right now with a partner who's at live Las Vegas right now for an RV show. And he's seeing exceptional performance on the 4G side. So I mentioned Speedify's parent share feature. This lets the X510 share data connections from up to 20 mobile devices on the same network via the Speedify app. So in that respect, you can really combine up to 27 links, which is kind of crazy to think about. So let's take a look at the device's web interface and see why the X510 is so special. So let me just zoom in here real quick so you can get a good look at this. Much like many of the other web interfaces, we have this main screen where we can take a look at the device name, its serial number, its hardware. But we can also take a look at the data connections, confirm their connection, what their IP address, and things of that nature. So the router basically has two sides, as we like to say. It's going to have its device's web interface side, where we're able to pull up things like WAN, and we can dive into more details about these connections. So we can see on the 4G that we're connected to the T-Mobile. We can check out its values for its strength and connection, our Wi-Fi, the 5G devices, and so on and so forth. On the other side of the router is its local area network. So we can set things like the IP address and range. We can also assign our Wi-Fi radios to either connect to something like you saw, my house network, but we can also trigger this to serve in access point mode. So on the 2.4 radio, it's distributing its own SSID for me to connect to. I can also view all of my DHCP leases and the names if they're associated and set up static leases. So the Speedify tab is where things get really fun, and I'll zoom out here just a bit so you can see more at once. But within the Speedify section is where we're able to take a look at our data connection, monitor our outgoing bandwidth, so you can see that we're moving data back and forth. And here is where this starts to get pretty awesome. So with each adapter that you've seen on the WAN side, we now have features within Speedify to determine what we want to do with it. So if I come down and I'll click the 4G here, we can see some basic details about T-Mobile, but then we're also able to set priority. So this is where we can take a data connection, set it to be locked on to primary, secondary, maybe a backup source, or maybe that SIM or device we never want to connect to unless we've manually configured it. But of course, we always recommend the automatic mode. Now, some things have data caps, and so I have a Starlink Mini with a 50 gigabit plan, and when I want to use that, I can simply come down here and I can select 50 gigabits, and then what happens? Either I stop using it or I want to rate limit that. And so this will give the users the ability to be able to set this up and take control of their data plans as well to ensure that there's no high overages. So something that I think is really fantastic, and this is what sets this router apart, period, point blank. This is a feature only found, it's patent pending by Speedify, is this parent share. So when the internal or physical data connections are not enough, parent share is what gets you through. I recently talked with a parent who live streams games, and they don't always have fantastic internet at the venues. And so if anyone has the Speedify app on their phone, all they have to do is connect to the router's network, and they instantly can share the data from the phone into the production. And it makes a difference for this parent who wanted to live stream volleyball, but there was just nothing available. There was no public Wi-Fi to access. So they needed to aggregate and join all of these connections together. And so as we'll look at on the screen, we can see that I have my iPhone as well as my Samsung phone. Those are active connections into the router, and it will use those automatically as I need it. So I can start a bandwidth test on this, and it just is going to pull a speed test on the device. And so we're connected to the Northern Virginia, and so we're seeing, 462 megabits for a download. And then let's take a look at what the upload might look like for us here. So 346 megabits. I'm pretty confident that we could do a pretty successful live stream with those numbers. So as I mentioned, the server that I'm connected to, there's also the ability to access other countries. So there are Speedify servers all around the world. And so you can see we can pop in here to Italy, and we've got one at these 2 different locations, but also, places like Australia and the EU, a number of different servers. And you can kind of set what you want this to do, either to the fastest public. The other thing that I'll mention is that Speedify has the capability to stand up your own private dedicated server. Not only do we have plans for kind of this shared server, but we also have plans available should you need dedicated things. That's great for port forwarding needs for production, but quite literally Speedify will also build you a private server if you need that, and you're at that type of level. Those are things for like the 3-letter broadcast agencies that are interested in housing their own instance of Speedify on their own servers that they have control over. So with that, we can make adjustments to the setting. We can adjust the bonding mode. This is this is really interesting. So speed automatically negotiates everything you need. When you're on redundant mode, all packets go across every connection. And so when you have multiple fiber connections, that may be advantageous to basically guarantee that everything gets there. And then because Speedify is a VPN, you have the option for encryption, which is enabled on by default. And something else through Speedify, sometimes you just need to bypass certain things. So for example, inside my house, we weren't able to get onto Paramount. It was detecting the VPN. So I just bypassed Paramount Plus right through the web UI, and then everything was good to go. So finally, with that, we have this side of the device where we can rename it. It has a USB net, which the front of the device allows you to hook up a USB cable, and then you're able to access the device, basically across the USB. It guarantees a connection to the device. Something else that we just did, you're seeing an early preview of, we are now making the RJ45 connections, both WAN and LAN. So in theory, you could have 4 WANs, or maybe you don't need any WAN because you've got cellular connectivity and you want all of the RJ45s to be LAN. This is a feature that's coming up here real soon. Finally, we have the ability to check online for firmware. This is through an AWS server hosted out of the US and Ohio. And then we have the ability to access logs and export anything for that. So that's a lot going over the router. We've been using the router ourselves over the past year. And during our testing, we have a couple different examples to highlight the benefits of the X510 in various use cases. Our first example or real world testing, you could say probably stress testing, was a stream for Mr. Beast and Kai Cenat on July 3rd. Many people had seen the router at trade shows. One of those was Mr. Beast's production team at Vid Summit. So they were kind of aware of that we were developing this solution. They were doing a live stream that basically replicated Kai Cenat's house in the middle of a field in North Carolina. They started building the house is under construction, this room, and then they realized oh gosh, there's no data connectivity there. So they called Speedify on July 2nd. Speedify called me, and I basically drove into the late night to get there with the routers. And we ended up bonding 2 Starlinks, the 4G, 5G SIMs. We had 2 hotspots connected. We were using parent share with phones, and kind of an off-the-wall story is, as all teams are monitoring everything that's happening, we're chatting back and forth because there were hundreds of thousands of people watching this live stream. This was a zero-fail venture. Somebody was standing over top of the main Starlink. And so we started to see the main Starlink drop. All the other data connections ramped up. A unique thing about this particular stream is they built this set identical to Kai Cenat's room. And so that also meant the streaming computer was OBS 1080, 32 megabits. They had, we weren't using anything like SRT. It had to be identical for what he used. In fact, they were even taping the chair exactly how his chair was shaped. His chair was taped. So At the end of the day, we were inside of an RV monitoring the entire live stream, the comments, making sure everything was good, chatting with our team all over the bonded connection. But we also needed to stream with zero packet loss. And I'm, happy to report that until the house blew up, we had zero packets lost, zero buffering issues. They were really blown away at what we were able to accomplish on such short notice. We also use the Miri router for our friends at Ecamm. So they have a creator camp up in Amesbury, Mass, and they historically have problems with the internet. They were live streaming Creator Camp TV from a brewery right across the street, a brew pub. And this was built in the 1800s. It's in a valley. It's got like 7 layers of brick. It's just not great for cellular connectivity. And as most venues say, they're like, hey, we have great internet. You can just connect to our Wi-Fi. Well, those things fail when you get, more than 50 people connected to the same network. Also, they're typically testing this out by doing web browsing. They're not going to be live streaming. They don't know when they say like great internet connectivity, that's not for our purpose, right? So we were able to use the Miri router to stand up the connection. And in fact, we actually watched their main network inside that brew pub completely go offline when many people were joining it for the guest network because there really wasn't great cell connectivity in there. So all of the other connections ramped up. We kept Creator Camp live through Ecamm software using a Mac their entire show. So they were blown away by the router. And then finally, for the past major several trade shows, the X510 has powered the Magewell and Telecam booths at NAB, Infocom, and IBC. And in fact, recently at NAB New York, where other booths couldn't even load a web page, we were sending video from Las Vegas to New York via SRT, and we played that both days without any issues. So those are just a few examples of how our team has used it and how the device is being delivered now. And we expect to hear more great stories. In fact, from Clint in Las Vegas, at the RV show, he's reporting back that they're having phenomenal success at the convention center right now.
Great, great. Yeah, so let's get right into it. We have one question here from Paul about the Miri. Paul asks, is the Miri X530 router being used in hotels and other hospitality venues as a primary internet service or for streaming live events?
Certainly for streaming live events. Look, as I mentioned, I come from production world. Before I started working at MVD, I own my own production company and I'm still heavily involved. So with Samsung and Harman Kardon, I'll be at CES myself producing that show for them again this year. This will be the 3rd year that I'll be there as a technical director. So there is, I have this background and this is where the router was really born out of.
Thanks so much to you, Ryan, and thanks to everyone who joined us today. Thanks, Ryan.
See ya. Thanks so much.